Hi, my name is Sebastian Matteau, and today I want to tell you a little bit about using arguments, keywords, argument lists, and keyword dictionaries in Python. So basically I want to tell you all about how you can pass arguments to functions. Now to demonstrate I made a very simple function here, move, that takes 4 arguments, an x coordinate, a y coordinate, right? So the starting position, a direction in which we're going to move, up, down, left or right, and a distance, so the number of units by which we're going to move. And the logic of the function is very simple. We say just check if the direction is up, then we increase the y coordinate by the distance. If the direction is down, we decrease the y coordinate. If the direction is left, we decrease the x coordinate. If the direction is right, we increase the x coordinate. And if the direction is anything else, we raise an exception to indicate that the direction was invalid, right? So we're going to be safe. We check if our coordinates or if the directions are sensible, and then we return the new x and the y coordinate. Now, so how do we use this function? Well, first we define our starting point, x and y. We just start at 0, 0. We print it out just so that we see what we're doing. And then we say, okay, we're going to move our x and our y coordinate. We're going to move up by 1 unit, and then the return value we store again as x, y, and we print out the new position. So if I select all of this and I run it, you will see in the debug window that we've moved from 0, 0 to 0, 1. Right? So we've increased the y coordinate by 1, which is exactly what we want to do if we move up. Now, so what does this tell us about the arguments? Well, the point here is that these arguments, they are passed by order. Right? So this x maps onto this x because they are the first. Then the y maps onto the y because it's the second. Up maps onto direction because it's the third, and distance maps onto 1 because they're the fourth. Right? So they are arguments that are passed by order. Now, you are allowed also to refer to arguments by their name. So we can say, for example, distance is 1 and direction is up. That's fine. What's kind of cool is that once we start referring to them by name, we can also swap their order. So we can say distance is 1 and direction is up. If I select this and I run it, you will see that it still works, right? So even though we violated the order because we've passed distance before the direction, whereas direction has been specified before distance in the function, Python still figures out which argument belongs to what, because we've actually called to refer to them by their name. Now, we're not allowed to do just anything. For example, all the arguments that we don't refer to by name, x and y, need to come before all the arguments that we do refer to by name, so distance and direction. So if we start to mix this up, if we say, for example, x distance is 1 and y, you see that it gives a syntax error and it says, okay, you're not allowed to do that. Once we start referring to it by name again, then everything's fine, right? So if we do this, the syntax error is gone. Okay, so these are arguments. Now, let's say that distance, especially in this case, is usually 1, right? Usually we want to move by 1. So what we can do is we can specify a default value for distance. Distance is 1. And once we've done that, we call it a keyword. So the difference between what people tend to call arguments and keywords in Python is that keywords have a default value. Sometimes people also talk about default and non-default arguments, but I would prefer the term argument and keyword. So distance is a keyword here, and x and y and direction are just arguments. Now, the main advantage of using keywords, providing a default value, is that you can omit that argument when you call the function, right? So this is redundant, distance is 1, because we've already specified 1 as the default value here, right? So we can just remove it. Up, and then I call it, and then it will know, Python will know that we want to move by 1 because we've specified that as a default value. Now, and then only if we want to say, for example, direction is 2, distance is 2, because we want to move by 2 units, we can specify it, override the default value, and now we move by 2 units. Right, so that's how keywords work. Now, and just as here when you call the function, also when you define a function, all the arguments, so the arguments without a default value, have to come before all the arguments with default value. Right, so if we were to move distance to here, to this place, we would get a syntax error. That's not allowed, because now we have argument, argument, keyword, and then an argument. Right? So all the arguments need to come first, and then all the keywords. So this is fine again. Okay, well, that's basically all there is to say about arguments and keywords. Now, let's move on to a slightly more exotic and complicated way of using arguments, namely through argument lists. Now, and to do that, I will define a new function, which I've called moveMore. And moveMore just moves more. It makes moves by multiple steps. Right, so here we have it. So what moveMore does is first it takes x and a y coordinate, so starting position, and then it takes a list of directions. Right, so we can move, for example, up, left, say. And then what the function does is it loops through all the directions, and then for each direction it makes one move, and then it returns the final position. So if we want to call moveMore, and we can do it like this, we say, okay, moveMore, x and a y coordinate, and then we say, okay, we give a list of directions. So we can start, for example, let's say just we're going to move by 2 steps, up and right. Okay, so we move by 2 steps. So x would map onto this, y would map onto this, and this whole list, up and right, would map onto directions. Now, if I select this and I run it, you see it does as we expect, right? So we've moved up by 1, so the y coordinate has increased by 1, and we've moved right, so the x coordinate is also increased by 1. Now, what would be kind of nice, right? You see that the way we call this function is a little bit clunky because we have these square brackets. Now, what would be kind of nice is if we could simply do something like this, right? We could say, okay, x, y, up and right. Now, the problem here is that we don't know, right? We want to make the function moveMore very flexible so that it can take an arbitrary number of moves. And now, basically, the way we've done it now, you would think that we need to define first direction 1 and direction 2, etc. Right? So we would need to make a move 2 function, a move 3 function, etc. And that's actually where argument lists come in. Because what we can do is we can do the following. We can start with an asterisk, and then we can say directions. And what this means is that basically the x still maps onto the x, the y maps onto the y, and all the arguments that follow and that don't really map onto anything are stored in a list called directions, in an argument list. And that's specified by this single asterisk. Right? So, and then we can again walk through this list and move, do as before, right? Make one move for every direction. So if I select this and I run it, you will see that it works. It just does exactly the same thing as before, moves to 1.1. But now we don't need to explicitly say that these 2 items are a list. We just pass them as normal arguments. And because we have an argument list here in the function, Python automatically captures essentially the up and the right into a single list called directions. That's the logic behind an argument list. It can be kind of convenient. Okay, now you also see that the moveMore function is a little bit more restricted than the move function because it doesn't accept a distance keyword, right? Whereas the move function does accept a distance keyword. So what can we do? We can say, okay, distance is 1, and and then we say distance is 1. Distance is distance. Right, so we take this keyword argument and then we pass it on to move, right? So if I select all of this and I run it, you will see it still works. I have to point out though that this is only valid Python syntax in Python 3. In Python 2, you are not allowed to put keywords or arguments after an argument list. So basically, once you've done this, you're not allowed in Python 2 to put any keywords behind it, but in Python 3 you are. Right, so what we're working with here is Python 3. Now, so that's kind of nice, right? Because now we can do something like this. We can say distance is 2. You can select everything, run it, and you see we move to 2,2. So that's quite nice. Now we can make it even more fancy using a keyword dictionary. And that works as follows. So instead of specifying explicitly that we have a keyword distance, we say, okay, keyword args, for example. The keyword args is kind of the default name. and we prefix it by 2 asterisks. So basically, if you prefix it by 1 asterisk, it becomes an argument list. If you prefix it by 2 asterisks, it becomes a keyword dictionary. And then what we can do is the following. Okay. So, and we can call it exactly in the same way as we're doing now. So if I select it, and this, I should say, is both valid in Python 2 and Python 3. So after an argument list, you are allowed to put a keyword dictionary in Python 2 and 3, of course. Now, so what happens here is essentially that all keywords, so in this case distance, just distance, are captured in this keyword in a dictionary called keyword args. And without knowing what this dictionary even is, we just pass it blindly onto move, right? So maybe to make it more clear, I can say, okay, let's print out keyword args. And you will see, if I select everything, you will see that this print statement corresponds to this, and you see that it's a dictionary with a key distance and a value 2, right? So that comes from here. So this keyword argument is transformed into a distance. Now, and then we pass it again on to our move function, where it goes into here, and that's how basically the distance is preserved. The distance keyword is preserved, even though we have not explicitly defined a distance keyword here in move more. Right? So let's say that we could also let's say that we, for example, pass keywords that don't exist. So say invalid is true, for example. If I select this and I run it, okay, move complains that it got an unexpected keyword argument called invalid. And this happens because invalid is a keyword argument that is here captured in this keyword dictionary. We pass this keyword dictionary onto the move function, and that basically means the same thing as calling the move function with a keyword argument named invalid. Well, there is no keyword argument named invalid in the move function, so we get a type error, right? It's not allowed. Now, the main advantage of using a keyword dictionary is if you have a function that calls another function, and it's basically it should pass on a lot of argument keywords to this new function. Say, for example, that you're drawing that you have a function that draws a line, and that function takes a color, for example, a line color. It takes a pen width for how thick the line is. It takes a line style, maybe whether it should be dotted or dashed, etc. It takes a whole bunch of keywords. Now, and then you have another function, rectangle, that simply draws 4 lines to create a rectangle. Now, then a keyword dictionary is very convenient, because you could basically, the rectangle could simply capture all the keywords in a keyword dictionary and pass them on to the line function, right? So in those kinds of cases, keyword dictionaries can be quite convenient. Now, in general, what would be my recommendation when using arguments, keywords, argument lists, and keyword dictionaries? Well, I would say that in general, keywords are really your friend. I think keywords are quite nice because they are named, right? So a keyword like distance here are quite nice to use because they have a name, which makes it much easier to work with, right? People tend to mix up orders of arguments if they need to be passed by order. So using keywords that have a name is generally leads to more bug-free code, I think. So in many cases, I would say prefer keywords over arguments without a name, or arguments that are specified by order. And argument lists and keyword dictionaries, as you see here, can be quite convenient, but I would say use them only in very specific cases if you really know what you're doing, because they can also lead to kind of confusing code. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.